Hey YouTube, so this is actually a request video, well sort of, from one of my clanmates. It's going to be some tips for new or bad World of Tanks players, which hopefully will help people improve and they'll be able to do better in randoms. This won't affect clan wars, it's just for randoms. Right now, picking the correct tanks is really important. So that's tip one. Pick the correct tank to play. Now, for newer players, you'll probably be looking at the lower tiers. Now, I've already done a video on what tanks are probably the best to grind. I'm going to link that video, but yeah, I would suggest look at the entire lines. But in terms of looking for a tank to play in a random, like let's say you're grinding a tank, you need to have your tank set up in the right way. So I'm going to use the T28 medium as an example. It's tier 4. I don't have enough credits to buy some of the guns. Now, it's pretty terrible tier 4 when it's stock. It's very hard to do well in it if you haven't got the best modules in it, and that's sort of one of the points I'm trying to make. You need to have sufficient penetration for anything you're going to face. So you want to be using something that can pen tier 6s if you're in tier 4, etc. You also want to have something that's moderately accurate. So this is actually 0.34, which is extremely accurate. It's got 112mm pen. So I've picked this at 57mm on this tank. Basically because the pen and the accuracy, I mean there's nothing anywhere close to it. So it's something you need to really consider. If you can't pen or hit the target, you're not going to be doing well in the battle. So have the right modules equipped in it. I would suggest the free XP you get from battles, save them for modules on the next tank, because some modules can be terrible. Let's say this the KV1's first gun compared to the second gun. It's just no contest. One's clearly better than the other in pretty much every way. So once you've got your correct tank, tip number 2 is going to be to set yourself a goal in that tank. What I mean by that is not a goal of, oh, I want to get this tank eventually. That's a long-term goal. Those kind of goals stop you from getting burnt out on the game, yes, but when you're in a game, when you're in a battle, to improve yourself, you need to kind of set yourself a goal for that game. And I recommend you kind of focus on getting a certain amount of damage. And it's sort of the way I play to get WNA, is you try and get a certain amount of damage. Once you've got that, you're on a good game. You can take a few more risks, but play conservatively to get that goal. A good goal for me, the way I see it, a good goal to have is to have a damage ratio of +1, which means overall in that tank you do more damage than you receive. So I'm going to show my stats, which are terrible. They're very, very bad. You can criticize them all you want, but I'm going to use again the T28 as an example. Now I played this tank as a noob. This is my 4th tank that I owned. I recently bought it back because it's fantastic. Now your damage ratio, mine's 0.37. That means per game I only do 150 damage and I receive 282. What you want to aim for is for example to be 300 damage caused per game and less than 300 received. So that works on your survival and your damage. So I mean, a goal can be to win the game as well. That's the ultimate goal. But I would highly recommend, if you want to turn into a decent player, you're not going to win all of those games. In fact, you can have days where you don't win anything. But what you want to try and do to improve is you want to have good games personally every single game, which means high amount of damage. You want to be kind of aiming for the hit points of your vehicle or more with damage before you play unsafely. So that sort of stuff. The next thing I'm going to talk about is going to be team management in battles. You need to know when to follow your team and when not to follow your team. Sometimes your team can be useful, sometimes your team can be a detriment. And realizing that does take a while because you need experience seeing those signs. Particularly, you want to be looking at the minimap. If your team sends 2 or 3 tanks one way and everyone else the other, you're probably not going to survive that long going on the side with 3 or 4. So you're probably best off going on the side with the more players and helping them push through that. I mean, sometimes you have players there who will be really bad and there'll be 7 tanks held up by 1 enemy tank and they won't push. There's nothing you can do about it. It's not your fault if that happens. But I mean, feel free to come back and defend like once that happens. I would also suggest that beware, make sure you don't have any tanks who are likely to block you or kind of obstruct you in gameplay. And this is something I struggle with, but not getting blocked and not getting shot by your teams is really, really important. As well as not shooting your team. Something I should probably be reminded more than once in a while. Another aspect of this would be picking out teammates who you could really rely on and you can trust to go around the corner with you. If you see a medium going around the side of a rock, you're in another medium, you want to be going around the other side of that rock to support the medium of your team who's gone and he's going to take damage to try and get damage on the enemy. The least you can do is make sure that he actually survives by putting more shells into the enemy than your ally takes. And that's how you find good teammates. That's how you find good players in games. They're often the team players, people that will take a hit for everyone else. The people that will follow someone after taking a hit. And that wins games. That really, really does win games. The next thing that can really improve your gameplay is if you improve your accuracy. As in, if you hit the target more. The more you hit the target, the more damage you're going to do. Now in this footage, I'm going to show leading. And I actually land every single shell that I fire here through leading the target, i.e. shooting where he's going to be when my shell lands, rather than actually shooting at the target himself. I only fire when I have clear shots as well, at that point, because I don't want to waste my ammunition. That last hit actually got me an extra hit on him. That was a blind hit. Now we're going to go on to blind shots themselves. Now for this particular exercise, what I did is I actually asked the guy that I was in a training room with, I asked him to hide in any bush at all in his area of the cap, in the raised area. Any bush at all. He wasn't going to tell me where. Now, I was going to demonstrate blind shots, and currently I am demonstrating blind shots. Now, the first shell that I fired in this game actually hit him direct. I had no idea where he was. I had no way of knowing where he was. Basically what happened is I guessed he was there. I guessed that was going to be the most common place for him to be. He then did say on TeamSpeak that he had been shot by me with that first shell, which is why I kept firing. But normally I tend to put 3 shells into one spot, 3 shells into the next, 3 shells into another. Of course, it really does depend on your reload. You don't want to be wasting too much time doing blind shots, but you always want to make sure you're doing blind shots. It makes a huge difference in the games. I would say that if you combine me guessing bushes where people are sitting in and guessing where people are going to be after they've just disappeared, I'd probably land 1 of every 2 blind shots, and on average I'd say about a quarter of my damage per game is done just on blind damage, and it's completely safe to do because you're guessing he's there, you're not spotting him, he's not spotting you, you're guessing he's there. If he's not, oh well. If he is, then you've just got a massive hit. Well, not a massive hit, but you've got a hit. It's also a good practice to maybe fire HE whilst doing blind shots as well. Now, I'm going to attempt here. This is going to be a very difficult exercise to do, but I'm going to attempt to show what it looks like when you land a blind hit in open ground. You can't see if they're in a bush, so if they're in a bush and you hit them with a blind shot, you won't see them. But this is the same kind of thing as with the arty video that I put, which I will put a link to that as well. It's basically, if your shell disappears before it hits something, if it disappears in midair before it hits something, it's hit the invisible target, unless you're in low tiers where sometimes they disappear because you're hitting maximum range. But later tiers, like tier 5 onwards, if your shell disappears, most likely it's hit something that you've not seen. For instance here, I'm really struggling in this example to not be spotting him. Now, I don't know if you saw that, you have to look really carefully. The first 2 shells missed. I believe this 3rd shell actually hits. But what you'll see is that the shell will disappear. Yeah, the shell will disappear like closer than the ground behind, than the background behind. So that's how you work out if you've hit something. Now, why is this useful? If you hit something, there's a good chance you've tracked it. Shoot again. Keep shooting until it either moves or is dead, because you can get a lot of damage on that. I mean, I've had games where for instance, just yesterday I was in the charioteer, the enemy had an IS, he was sitting kind of a quarter of a way around a rock. He had then been unspotted, and like I was firing at him, I fired 2 shells at him whilst he was spotted. Then when he was unspotted, I fired some more shells, and I kept firing, and I eventually got the kill. He was on about 700 health when he disappeared, and the reason for that is my shells kept tracking him and kept doing damage. He was invisible, I couldn't see him, I couldn't actually see if he was still there, but I kept putting the shells in because I had nothing to lose by doing so, and therefore I got the kill on him, and I got a lot more damage in that game. Now the next biggest thing, and this is the biggest thing I can actually say for new players in World of Tanks. And this tip is going to kind of be 2 in 1, and it's going to be survival and hit points, hit point exchange and survival, excuse me. Now, a hit point exchange, you want to have good hit point exchange, which is basically you do more damage than you receive in any situation. Think of it as rounds. Like, if you get a show off on the enemy and he doesn't get a show off on you, you've won that round. You win 5 or 6 rounds, and then you've beaten the tank, and you've got a decent amount of damage for it. So think about this. So what you just saw in that battle is, well, what you are seeing is we use like a hit point exchange there. We managed to get the 59-16 so kind of confused and isolated. We were able to take him out very, very quickly, and we lost no hit points. That was good hit point exchange. Now it's 2 on 1. We've got the numbers. Now you're going to see here why that hit point exchange at the start won this game. Because this Cromwell B almost beats the both of us, but because we had more hit points when firing at him, we were doing better. Now, surviving shells is really, like, surviving against the enemy is really a big part of hit point exchange, and a big part of doing well in World of Tanks. And there are different ways you can do, like, surviving. As you see, we won that game. Surviving can be done by angling your tank, which quite a few people know, deflecting shots, making sure shots miss you, turning your turret side to side to kind of hide weak spots. Same with turret. Same with the hull. We're going to go into angling and weak spots after this. The other way you can avoid, the other 2 ways you can avoid taking damage in World of Tanks, one is the camo mechanics. I'm not going to go into that in this video because I've done an entire video specifically on camouflage. I'll link that as well. I'll link probably all of my videos at this rate. And the other alternative, if you don't have camo, you don't have armor, you don't have angling, basically get yourself into a position where you can't be shot at. If the opponents can't actually shoot at you, then you're going to be doing damage to them and not receiving any back. And by not shooting at you, I mean, let's say for instance you've got 3 tanks surrounding one, and you're going to sit in the footage. If I splice correctly, you'll see the KV5 footage now, not the RS4 footage, which I'm seeing. You'll be able to see I cannot actually focus on any tank in my KV5, because as soon as I focus on someone, they run back behind cover. They're keeping their tank alive. My gun's pointing at them. I'm not pointing at their allies. As soon as I turn to point at their allies, the ally hides, and the first person comes out and shoots again. And this is a really, really good way of harassing heavy tanks in particular. But this is a really good way of getting good hit point exchange. If your enemy are so concentrated on your allies, use that to your advantage. Flank them. I mean, these examples we're doing for this kind of gameplay, we've intentionally taken very weak tanks in terms of gun against a big, stronger tank. And the reason for that is that you won't be able to pen the front of some of these tanks. You'll have to pen the side or the rear. But even something that's so ridiculously overpowered compared to your opponents can lose just because your opponents work together as a unit, and they're able to shoot your side and rear without taking a hit back. Now, in the KV5 video, I hope it's going to still be going on. I want to draw to the fact that the Rudy and the Cromwell were doing it perfectly. The Rudy took a shot that was unlucky on his part. I sort of expected someone to pop up there. The Cromwell didn't take a show of damage because he was doing the right thing. The Tiger, however, is a player who needs to kind of understand using cover, even though I wasn't pointing at him. He should have still been able to get to the point where he could use more cover if I did decide to focus him, which I did. And had I been able to kill the Tiger, that would have made it much harder on the enemies. And plus, if I had managed to kill the Tiger wouldn't have got that much damage. He would have had a bad game. Whereas if he was still able to survive and stay in cover, he would have had a better game and still been full hit points. And I actually spoke to him after the game regarding this, and he said, well, I was pointing the other way in my KV5 against his teammates, so he thought he'll go up behind me and shoot me because he couldn't shoot me where he was. And taking the flak is a really good thing to do in a heavy, but I wouldn't suggest it to kind of new players until you know how to angle. But in that kind of situation, like, no one needs to take damage, no one needs to take flak there. You just need your opponent pointing and confused. Now, his argument was he couldn't shoot me from where he was, so he had to go forward. Now, he didn't have to come into the open, he could have gone round. So you need to keep an eye on your mini-map. Look for opportunities to get a better position on your opponent while still being completely safe. Something else I want to mention in regards to this KV5 battle, if there were 3 KV5s there, it would have worked almost as effectively for the 3 more mobile tanks. However, because the 3 KV5s could aim at one guy each, but you've still got 3 fast tanks who, to be honest, can just pick one off. If you're the Tiger at the back and there's 3 KV5s shooting at your 2 medium teammates, you in the Tiger need to get into a position where only one of those KV5s could viably hit you, and you could only hit that one, and go for that one tank. Take him out before his ally can shoot you. I mean, he could have 2 allies pointing your way, he's pointing the other way, but he's the first one you can hit. Why expose yourself to his allies? I mean, you might as well get your easy damage in that way. You're not taking damage, you're doing damage back to him, and it's gonna work. Now, the final part of this tips episode, the final tip, is weak spots. Now, weak spots is something you learn through experience in the game. You should be shooting every weak spot that you can see. Never shoot something that's not a weak spot. And yeah, a good website to find weak spots is whatguru.com. I'll put a link to that in the description. Now, what you're seeing on screen here is we're sort of doing a 2v2. There's some low tiers. Ignore the low tiers. Me and the enemy R4 are what I'm about to say, because what we are doing here is we're basically having a one-on-one, and I'm trying to sort of angle towards the SU-85 to get him to bounce more as well. Now, the key thing here is hit pool exchange and hit pool exchange and survival. Me and Ferb are going to be surviving a lot of shells because of angling, and you're going to see the importance of getting those first few shots off as well. So I mean, let's say your opponent's facing the wrong way, but you're not, but you're shooting them, and then they turn around, but they're lower health. You've got a huge advantage, and you're going to see exactly why in this battle. I mean, this goes on for ages, this battle, but I got 2 really strong shots off at the start, and that sets the tone for the battle. There's nothing he could really do, because he was always behind from the start. And I'm getting perma-tracked here by an SU-85, so that's rather annoying. But effectively here, I'm angling so that I'm at about 45-30 degrees to my opponent. That's a particular angling style of the IS-4, and what you can also see now is something called side scraping. This is something really important that you need to learn. Side scraping is showing your back, and you're basically, me and Furby spend half of the game side scraping on each other. It's exposing the back of your side tracks and hiding your front plate, which the effect of this makes an extremely difficult angle on your side, and it makes you almost impenetrable, despite the bigger armor being on the front. Although on the IS-4 the bigger armor is on the side than the front. He did not side scrape or angle correctly, that's why I went through. Now, there are also weak spots on the IS-4 which both me and Furby are actually shooting at. And it sort of shows why weak spots are important. We're doing a combination, the two of us, we're doing a combination of ensuring prolonged survival from our tanks and trying to get that extra shot in. Like, you may see what I'm trying to do at this stage is, if he gets a shot in, I have to make sure I get a shot in, and I have to make sure his shell doesn't do damage and mine does. He's doing exactly the same thing, and this lasts for ages. A player who is reckless against an IS-4 like this would not survive long, because he wouldn't be able to survive, let alone be able to survive to land this many shells. Now, Furby takes advantage here. I shoot the SU-85 because he's annoying. Furby takes the advantage there and puts a shell into me as a result of that. And he's actually loaded quicker than me, which surprised me. He took out my gun. But yeah, I turned to face that SU. Furby saw me facing away. He got that free shot on because he knew there was no chance of anything coming in return. Now you're going to see some underhand tactics from me. I'm going to probably start using high explosive in a bit. To put into the side of his tracks when he's side scraping, because at least then I still do some damage. I'll explain about shell mechanics. Well, I have explained about shell mechanics in another video. Once again, I will link every kind of resource I use in the description at the bottom. And all this stuff, they're not secret. There's no secrets to it, really. It's more the mentality of playing rather than playing itself, which causes a lot of newer players not to be that great. Accuracy isn't an issue normally for new players. It's quite often they can learn to angle quite well, but it's the mentality that they're more likely to go rushing off. Play patiently and calm. Snipe for the first few shots of the game. Like, always make sure you're not the first one taking shells. Make sure you're never taking damage, but you're always in a position to deal damage. So the ideal game for me would be, for instance, in the IS-4, I would land about 5 or 6 shells on enemy tanks just as a second line support, without taking damage because they're focused on my allies. Once my allies are low and there's no way that they can survive any longer, then I push forward and I use my armor to angle, and I go for a hit point exchange out. I try and make sure that every shell I fire does more damage than any shell I take. So I use my armor and my hit points to block damage that would go into my allies. I keep my allies alive. I then put shells into the enemy, obviously trying to destroy them. But if I'm able to get a good hit point exchange in that situation, it's really good for the team because I'm taking no damage. I can tank for longer, and the opponents have less health. I just want to point out in the video, which I'm going to let this video play on, something happened there that was really weird. My shell actually penned at an angle which it shouldn't have in the IS-4 against the sidetrack. So if anyone can explain that, please do. RNG. I now do something a little bit unusual here. I've got damage modules. Now, I've lost sight of my opponent, so I don't know which way he's going to come. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to angle towards both sides, or at least I'm going to attempt, and then he pops up. But I'm attempting to angle towards both sides in the hope that that would be a kill shot if I landed there. I'm trying to angle towards both sides just in case he came round either way. I'm already angled towards him, so it's that kind of awareness you need to have as well. Now, the other biggest tip, which I wouldn't recommend to new players because it can be quite confusing and overloading, is of course learn the camouflage and the spotting mechanics. As I say, I've got a video for that. Do learn that because that's really important to being effective in this game. Now you can see this is the end of the battle, and the hit point exchange has been mad. But I've now got the initiative. I've got a one shot on him, which I've had for about 5 shots now, where I just need to wait for him to come to me. I got the shot in. Now, I did have an advantage on hit points earlier in that game, where I was on 600, he was on 200. He was one-shotable, I was two-shotable. Because I got good exchange at the start, I was able to make up for my mistake and actually tank that shell. So that was good. So thank you everyone for watching. I really hope this has helped a lot of you guys out. This isn't a guide for becoming a unicorn, but this will definitely get you to around yellow or greenish. I want to say thank you to my clanmates for helping me create the video, and I also want to remind everyone that self-preservation is key in randoms, but when it comes to clan wars you need to listen to FC and do what he says, even if it's bad for self-preservation. So like, comment, subscribe, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys later.